Alright, we're going to start off here in the paint room with the fill tool chosen. I have a camouflage pattern chosen in the tool options panel under custom texture. In the layer panel, I want to make sure I select the right layer and then click the layer button in the tool options panel, and that's going to fill the entire object on this layer. In the material preview panel, you can see that I chose a camouflage pattern as our base. That's a result. We can use this as a starting point. And I want to go to the layer panel and create a new layer. Rename it Body Fill 02. And I'm going to hide the one that we previously created so that I can see this new one a bit better. And again, I'll choose Custom. I'll name it accordingly. Then I want to select the color texture. Then I'm going to change the convex color. What this does is it applies a color tint to the fill. Now the concave color. I'll reselect the convex color to adjust it. And then do the same for concave. I'm going to tweak the anisotropy setting. I'll change the color preference, which is basically the amount of opacity it's going to apply to the color tint. Now adjusting concave opacity, then convex opacity, and just adjusting each one accordingly. I'm not going to click the Save button in order to save this basically as a preset that I can always get back to. So let's adjust the edge contrast. I'll then click the Layer button in order to fill the entire layer once again. And there's a result. So I'm just looking over the patterns throughout the model here. Now I'm going to adjust the color by going to the Textures menu. Under Adjust, we'll select Gamma Correction. Before I can see any adjustments in the viewport, I need to click Preview. With that done, I'm going to skip forward now to adjusting the hue, saturation, and lightness. I want to turn Preview on as well. So adjust the hue and the saturation. And I hit OK. Alright, looks like we're good to go. And now I want to switch to the Surface Materials panel, and I'm going to hide all the objects that I'm not currently working on. I want to work on the teeth for the time being. I'm going to expand my right column a little bit, and in the Paint Layers panel, I'll choose the Teeth layer. I'm going to click on the new layer icon to create sort of an overlay layer just for the teeth. I'll now click on the foreground color swatch. Switch to a bar image picker. With the paintbrush already selected, I'll change my brush alpha, but before I do, I want to change the thumbnail size. And I'll choose something that's kind of a spongy, porous material. Before I go any further, I need to make sure that in the Surface Materials panel, the layer is not locked, which it was. I'll now hit the S key to turn on the Symmetry panel and select X-axis and turn off the Symmetry plane visibility. That means it's still in Symmetry mode. I just don't have that red plane obscuring my view. So I'm just going to continue brushing kind of a rough golden brown, kind of really dark color base. By the way, I happen to be using a 3D connection device, which is a space pilot that allows me to paint as I'm rotating about the model. And for procedures like this, it really is immensely helpful. That way I don't have to stop as I'm texturing. I can continue brushing. So I'm going to do a little bit of this in the 2D texture editor, where you can see live updates as I'm brushing. You can see how it's reflecting that change in the 3D viewport. And for what it's worth, this is not intended to be a master class in texture painting. You can find that elsewhere, but this is just a practical example of using the paint tools for projects that are similar to this. Obviously, you'd spend quite a bit more time and maybe use different techniques. If I were to be doing this on a large-scale commercial project, obviously I would probably hand paint all those individual patterns, but again, this is just for demonstration purposes in order to highlight some of the more common tools that you'll want to use. I switched to the Freeform Lasso in the E panel, and that allows you just to make a selection, and 3D Coat will apply paint to that selection. Now if you're in the 3D viewport, when you're using the Freeform Lasso, in the E panel, if you check ignore back faces, it's only going to paint what the camera can see. If you uncheck that, then it will paint all the way through, and many times that's what you want. As you can see here in the lower left hand corner of the E panel. In the color picker, I'm going to switch to a darker color. Let's go to the toolbar and adjust the opacity downward, just like we would in Photoshop. I'm now going to speed up the playback quite a bit while I continue brushing here. And to navigate inside your 2D texture editor, all you have to do is middle mouse click and drag to pan, but it's a little bit different if you want to zoom. In order to do that, you simply hover over an empty space inside your UV map and right click and drag and it'll zoom. However, if you hold down the Alt key while you right click and drag, it will zoom also, so you don't have to hover over an empty particular part of your UV map. And this also applies to the UV room as well when you're working with your preview panel, so the navigation is exactly the same. Okay, I think we're done with the color for the most part. I think we're about ready to move on to applying some depth or some scratches in the normal map. So I'm going to choose kind of a rough brush alpha, and I'm going to turn off the color and glossiness channel and just scrub it a little bit, and just doing a little bit of testing here on the normal map. If you want, you can always apply depth and paint and glossiness information all simultaneously on any given layer. But in this particular instance, I wanted to use different brush alphas, one for color and another one just to create a few different scratches in the normal map. So enable just color again, just to kind of touch up a few areas. I'm now going to switch up to a lighter color to brush on the very ends. Just to give it kind of a worn feel. Choose a different brush alpha. I'll go back to using just the depth channel. I'll undo. So it's going to be a very slight effect, so I want a very small amount in the depth channel, and that's basically about 2%. Just want to break up the smoothness of the surface and also the glossiness as well. Speeding up the playback once more. Just trying to create a little bit of cross hatching here with the different brush alpha. I think we're about done at this point in the video. We're going to pause right here and pick up in the next one. We're going to start working on the body. So stay tuned. We'll see you then.